You may want to have this video playing on one screen or device and have another screen so that you can work in SPSS. You can pause this video while you work in SPSS. This is what we will cover in this workshop, and you can use the bookmarks to jump to any of these sections. This session is about the SPSS software itself, how to use that software. We're not going to be talking about statistics today. So let's first talk about opening SPSS or getting SPSS onto your laptop, and then getting some data into SPSS. If you go to the Maths Skills Centre VLE workshops getting started with SPSS, which is where you will have found this video, you can click the .sav file there called Workshop Data Statistics Anxiety Questionnaire. And by clicking on that, SPSS will open. This is the VLE, and this is the file that will open SPSS. If you're opening SPSS for the first time, it will take longer. So you can see that we've got two tabs down here. One is the data view and one is the variable view. So the variable view is given information about each of the columns in the data view. Once we ask SPSS to do something, we'll also get another window which is called the output window. So the data that we're going to play with today is based on a questionnaire to measure something called statistics anxiety. This data isn't real, these aren't the responses from real people. And it uses a two sub-scale set of questions. And what I mean by that is there's 5 questions to measure the worth of statistics and 5 questions to measure people's ideas about statistics teachers. And they're taken from a questionnaire called the STARS scale. The other thing we've got in this data set, if we scroll to the end, you'll see a column which is called test score. So these are imaginary test scores of, let's say, a statistics exam that these students have taken. Just so you understand where this data came from, this is some of the questions. These are questions that were used to make up this data. So we're asking people what gender they are. We're asking them what faculty they're in. And then we have some questions which are all about the worth of statistics. So these 5 here. And then we've got 5 questions which are all about people's perceptions of statistics teachers. And that's these last 5 here. There are other ways to open up SPSS and to get data into SPSS. First, I'm going to talk about how to get SPSS onto your own laptop if you've not managed to do that already. If you follow this link, you'll get to the University of York's IT software pages. And this is where they give you instructions on obtaining the SPSS software. So to get it on unmanaged PCs and home use, so i.e. laptops, we have installation guides here. You have the download for SPSS. And the other thing that you'll need is the license code. When you click on this license code, it asks you to sign in just to prove that you're a University of York student. If you're on a university computer, you can click Windows and under the letter I, you'll find SPSS. That's because it's actually called IBM SPSS, so it'll be here. To get data in, there's a few ways you could do that. If you had your data in an Excel file, you could go to the File menu in SPSS choose Import Data and click on Excel. And that will take you to a sort of wizard where you follow the instructions to get your data in. However, I think a much easier way is just to copy and paste from Excel. So to do that, let's say you had your data in an Excel spreadsheet like this. You would highlight all the data, including the column headings. Press Ctrl C to copy it. And then in a blank data set in SPSS, if you right-click your mouse, you'll get an option which is Paste with Variable Names. If you select that option, it pastes it in, and the column names are in the column names in SPSS. Another way that some of you might find useful to get data in is if you've collected survey data using Qualtrics. Qualtrics is software that's used to create questionnaires, and the University of York has a license for it. I'll demonstrate doing that using my Qualtrics account. So these are all my Qualtrics projects. If I clicked on one of them to go into it, there's a data and analysis option here. And then if I go to export and import button, I've got an option to export my data. And when that comes up, I can choose to export it to SPSS. I click download and then it would go into SPSS. It's important to know that you need to have your data in a certain format in order to work with it in SPSS. And if you put your data into that format from the start, it will save you some problems later. So the way you need to have your data is to make sure you have one person or replicate per row. Sometimes people talk about this being long data opposed to wide data, or sometimes some people call it tidy data, in case you've heard people talk about that. So I've got two examples here. Study example 1, we've got some yields where we've compared rice plants growing under dry, wet and medium conditions. And on a spreadsheet or in a table, you might have collected your data like this, but SPSS won't be able to work with your data in that format. You want to have your data so that all the yields are in one column, and then you've used another column to show whether that plant was grown under dry, wet or medium conditions. So this way we have a plant per row. If you're working with people, then we've got another example that you might be able to relate to. This is study example 2. This is where each person has taken a test and then they're taught by either method 1 or method 2, and then they take another test. And you might record your data in this way, where you've got everyone in method 1 here and everyone in method 2 here, and you've got this person's pre-test score on this row and the same person's post-test score on that row. And what we actually want is to have one person per row, so that each person's on the same row. And then we use another column to say whether that person was taught using method 1 or method 2. Let's take a closer look at the variable view now in SPSS. This displays information about each variable or column. So what we've got is a short name here. So that's a name that's at the top of the column. The other important parts of variable view that I think you want to know about are label. So label is just a fuller name. So for example, sometimes I would write the whole question from a questionnaire there, but give it a short name under here. The other thing you might want to take note of is measure. So this is where you input what type of code it is, whether it's ordinal, nominal, or scale data. And the other column that's useful to know about is the values column. And that tells SPSS, and it reminds you what the codes mean. So for me, I've got this data set up that I've coded gender using numbers. But in the values column, what I can do is tell SPSS that 1 means female, 2 means male, and 3 is other or prefer not to say. And that will remind me as well when I get some output. We have types of data, which I showed you is under this measure here. You might be wondering what the difference is between these 3 different types. So if we have nominal, that's what we call categorical data. So in our case, gender would be a category. So you're either male, female, or other or prefer not to say. And treatment might be another example of a category. So let's say whether they're under top method 1 or method 2, for instance. Ordinal data is again categorical data, but it has an obvious order. And the most common example of ordinal data are the answers in a questionnaire. And sometimes people call that Likert scale data. So it might be that you either have to answer strongly disagree, disagree neither, agree, and strongly agree. That would be ordinal data. Then we have scale data. And that's when it's on a continuous number line, a continuous scale, and there's many possible values. So examples of that could be temperature, or we could have weight. And SPSS needs the information in variable view to run certain tests. So if you don't fill in this measure column, it sometimes refuses to run tests or do anything with the data. And you also need it to interpret the output. So we're going to do some practice in variable view. I'm going to get you to do all these different actions. So the first thing I'm going to get you to do is just practice changing a name. And we're going to change this Q1G to Q1 gender because that means something. So double click in that box and just write gender. Then what we're going to do is under the label column, we've not filled in the label for Q9 human. So we're going to click into that box and we're going to type Q9 most statistics teachers are not human. We're typing in this phrase here. And then we're going to fill in the measures column. So to do that, when you click in the box, you'll see that there's a drop down arrow. And for gender, we're going to click nominal. For faculty, it's already chosen nominal. And in this case, I could choose ordinal because I've got a Likert scale here. However, I'm going to choose to pretend that this ordinal data is actually scale data. And the reason I'm doing that is because SPSS will then calculate means for me. It won't necessarily do that if I say that it's ordinal data. So we can go down each of the variables and change them to scale. The other thing I'm going to get you to do in the variable view is to go to this values column. And I'm going to work in the Q3 lived variable, not this Q2 faculty, so be careful you don't click on that one. We're going to click in here. And we're going to say what these numbers mean. I.e., we're going to say that 1 means strongly disagree, 2 means disagree, and so on and so forth. To do that, click in the box under values and you'll see you get this square with 3 dots in it. If you click in that box, you get this pop-up box. And you can enter the number next to value, enter what that value means, and click add. And we have to do that for each one of the numbers. If we press OK, we can now see that it knows what those numbers mean. Now we've got a lot of questions like that we would want to do the same for. And you don't want to go through each one and type that in. That would take a long time. So what you can do is you can right click on that box, copy it, and then right click on the next box and paste. And that puts it in for that question as well. We could go down and put that in, but one of our workshop participants found a quicker way of doing that. If you click on the bottom box and select them all, if it's going to work. Oh, here we go. It's doing it from the top. That will select all of them. We can right click, paste, and it does it all at once. I'm not going to do it for the end one because that's our test score. It doesn't apply there. So that's us got the data in and it's set up, ready to work with. Before you do any statistical analysis, more often than not, you need to do some sort of data management. So we're going to give you a few examples. We're going to clean our data or rearrange our data before analysis. So the 3 types of cleaning, if you like, that we're going to show you are how to exclude or select some cases. So you might want to do this, for instance, if someone hasn't answered a certain question. We're then going to show you how to recode a variable. i.e., if you've got a variable which is written in text, so we've got faculty here written in text, we might have to put it into numbers so that SPSS works with it. And then another thing that's quite common to do is create a new variable. So in questionnaires, if we have subscales, we might want to calculate the mean of several questions or several items. So in our case, we're going to take the mean of these 5 questions to get an overall worth of statistics score, and then take the mean of the next 5 questions to get an overall statistics teacher's score. So let's start by selecting some cases. Let's say we wanted to exclude all those people who didn't finish the questionnaire or that don't have a test score. So for some reason they didn't get to the end of the questionnaire, and therefore in question 12, this talk one, they're going to have a blank space, a missing value. Or maybe they didn't get to the questionnaire and they didn't sit the exam for some reason. In order to do that, we follow these instructions here. We go to Data, select Cases, and then click the radio button for If Condition is Satisfied. Then we can click in the button that says If. And in here we have to put in a sort of formula, if you like. So it works a little bit like formulas in Excel. So what I could do is I could type out this formula here. But what I'm going to demonstrate to you is how you would get that formula in using the calculator buttons in the function groups. So the first thing we want to do is choose this function here. This function is a bit strange to get your head round, but it's really useful. It means the number of missing values. So we're going to select all the rows where the number of values missing is 0, i.e. they don't have any missing values. We want those people. So to do that, let's get all those functions up. They're categorized, but I'm just going to view them all. And then they're in alphabetical order. So if we scroll down to n, we can see number missing. And it gives you a little description of how that works. If we double click it, it will jump up to the formula box. Now we're going to replace that question mark with the variable that we want it to use that number missing function in. So we want it to look in the question 12. So we'll double click question 12 and it jumps up there. And we want it to select all the rows where the number missing for question 12 is 0. We can add 2 conditions in this function. So we're going to add another condition where we also want to select the rows where the number missing for the test score is 0. And I appreciate that's hard to get your head around, so if you ever need to do something like this, again, come back and look at that formula. If we click continue and OK, you'll see we've got the output window there, which has appeared because we've done something in SPSS. Well, I'm just going to minimize that. I want you to look at the data view because you can see what's happened now is it's scored out some of the people, it's scored out some of the rows, and these are the people who haven't completed question 12 or they haven't sat the test. What's going to happen now is anything you do in SPSS is it's going to ignore those rows. Something else you might want to do is recode a variable. So we want to recode this Q2 faculty response from text into numbers, and you sometimes need to do that in order for SPSS to do an analysis. So to do that, you go to transform, recode into different variable. And you need to tell it what variable do you want to recode. So we're going to tell it that we want the faculty variable to recode the Q2 faculty variable. And it's got a question mark here because it doesn't know what the name of this new variable you want to create is going to be. So we're going to tell it that by typing in this box. Let's just name it faculty. We could call it anything, but we'll go for faculty. We have to click the change button and you'll see that the name faculty jumps up and replaces that question mark. So now it knows what that that column is going to be called. In order to tell it how to recode this variable, we click on old and new values. And what we have to do is type in what the old value is and what the new value is, then click add. But the difficulty here is that you have to type in the old value exactly. So if we type in science exactly as it appears in our data set and press 1, that will work. If we type in science space, then it won't recognize it. So it really does have to be exact. And I'm going to be careful here when I type in social science that I put a capital for S for the sock bit and a capital for the sci bit. If I don't do that and I put in small case, it won't work. Again, I've chosen to write my arts and hue for humanity with a and sign. I've got to include that and sign in order for it to work. So now what you'll see is there's an extra column at the end here. Don't worry about this column, this is just filtering for the last action. It's this column I want you to look at, that's the faculty. And I think I can see that I've got some missing values here for some reason. And that seems to be people who are arts and humanities. And what that means is that I've made a mistake. So if I go back into that, let's see what I've done wrong. Oh yeah, I can see I've missed out the S in arts and hue. So what I'm going to do is I'll remove that one. Try that again, this time with the S. And check it again. That looks better. There we go, we've got 3s now for arts and humanity ones. You might not like it displayed with 2 decimal places with these zeros. The way to fix that is to go into variable view, and under this decimals column, just reduce it from 2 to 0. Now if you go to your data view, it looks a bit better. The last data management thing I'm going to teach you is compute variable. So this survey is made up of 2 subscales. We want to calculate an overall worth and an overall teacher score by taking the means, which is a type of average, of question 3 to 7 for the worth and questions 8 to 12 for the teacher. To do that, we go to the transform menu, compute variable, and we have to tell it what we want that variable to be called. So I'm going to call mine worth. I could call it anything. I could call it mean worth or whatever I wanted. And then it's similar to what we've just done. We've got to put in an expression here, a sort of function here, to say what we want to use. So again, I could just type in this phrase here, which is mean, and lists all the questions I want it to take the mean of. But I'm going to do it using the functions group. So I'll click all to get up all the functions, scroll down to M and find mean, double click mean so it goes up here. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete these question marks and just leave the brackets. And then put in the list of questions. So I'll double click 3, then type comma, 4, 5, 6, 7, is that 5? 1, 2, 3, 4. That's my 5. Now when I press OK, that should create a new column for me. So let's check that. There we go, that's my new column. And that's the mean for each person for those 5 questions. We're going to repeat that for the teacher. So transform compute variable. This time I'm going to call it that column teacher. I've already got my mean function up there, so I'm just going to edit what's there. And this time I'm going to calculate it using different questions. So 8 to 12 questions. Press OK, put down my output window, and then I've got another column which is teacher. You'll see here it's not calculated a mean. That's because they didn't answer all those questions. So let's do some descriptive statistics. Frequencies, which is the same as counts, or percentages, are really useful for describing your data. So to get a count and the percentage of, let's say, males and females in our data, we want to get a box that looks like this. And to get that box, we go to Analyze Descriptive Statistics and Frequency. We want it to count the number and gender. So we're going to get that box across there. Press OK. And the output will appear in our output window. So here we go. We can see that we've got, it gives you a little summary of how many cases are valid. So we have 50. We didn't have anyone who didn't say what gender they were. And then we've got down here a count. So we've got 20 females, 28 males, 2 that were other or prefer not to say. And we've got the breakdown of the percentages. Percentages expressed as the number, valid number here. For us it's the same. And then a cumulative percentage. Another thing you might want to do are get tables that look a bit like this, because these tables contain the mean and the median and the standard deviation, which might be useful. So we're going to calculate the means and standard deviations for our test score, so for the student's exam score. To do that, go to Analyze. You can see here I can go to Analyze in either of the windows. I'm going to just reduce that window so you can see. Go to Analyze Descriptive Statistics and Explore, and take those test scores from the statistics exam and put them into the dependent list here. If you then click OK, what you'll get is the mean and the standard deviation for the whole of the group. We're just going to let SPSS do that. Sometimes SPSS is a bit of a clunky piece of software. It does take a while to do some things. Right, there we go. It's done it. So now we've got the mean of all the students here. It gives you the standard error here. The median is in that cell and the standard deviation is here. But what you might want, let me go back. What you might want are the means and standard deviations for that test score, but for each sex. So you want the females and males separately. To do that, we're going to go back to the same menu that we were in before. So we could go to Analyze Descriptive Statistics and Explore. But actually, there's a quicker way of doing something that you've done before, and it's using this recall button, which is just at the top here. So if I click on that, it gives me a list of all the commands that I've been to in the past. I've just been to Explore, so that one's at the top. If I click that, I'll get the same box appearing as I did before. The test scores are already on the dependent list. If I now add in gender to the factor list and press OK, I'm going to get out the means for female. So this is all the data descriptives for female, all the descriptives for male, and all the descriptives for people who said other or prefer not to say. Another thing you might want to do is look at a histogram or run a test called a Shapiro-Wilk test. And the reason you might want to do that is to test the assumption of normal distribution. So we're not going to talk about what assumptions are and what normal distribution are just yet. We do that in our next workshop. But what we're trying to do here is we're trying to get this table in our output, which has a Shapiro-Wilk result in it. And these numbers under the sig are p-values. We're also trying to get histograms. So this is what our histogram histograms will look like. This is what we're trying to achieve. So to do that, we go to the same menu options that we've just been to, this Analyze Descriptive Statistics and Explore. I'm going to again use the Recall button to go back to Explore. And we've already got our test score under the dependent list, and we've already got gender under our factor list. What we want to do now is go into plots. And if we tick this box, it's going to draw some histograms like this. And if we tick normality plots with tests, it will give us this box here. So click continue and OK. And it again gives us the descriptives, but this time we've got an extra box here. So we would look at these values here to interpret that. And it's also given us some nice graphs. So we can see if we've got a nice normal distribution bell-shaped curve by looking at these graphs here. You can use SPSS to make some graphs. Some people might teach you to use legacy dialogues. I'm going to teach you to make graphs using something called the chart builder. So what we're aiming to do is make a scatter graph which has people's answers, mean answers to statistics worth, and their test score on the y-axis. And we want to colour the dots according to gender. So to do that, we're going to go to Graphs, Chart Builder. If you get a pop-up window, just say OK to it. I've not got it for some reason this time. And the way this chart builder works is it's got all these options for different types of graph at the bottom here, and you can scroll through them. Oops, it's crashed. Let me try and fix that. So if we go to Graphs and Chart Builder, we've got a lot of options here, and you can flick through these options. These, I suppose, are subcategories. And we want to go to Scatter Dot. Let me move this so you can see the slides. Oh, I'm not going to be able to move it, and if I resize it, it might crash. We're going to choose from the Scatter Dot menu this one here. And so to select it, what we do is we click and drag it up to this empty space here. Now what we can do is select certain variables to go in the X, Y, and to tell it how to colour the dots. So for instance, we can take the worth variable and put it on the X. We can take the statistical test exam scores and put it on the Y, and then tell it that we want to colour the genders, colour the dots according to gender. So we're setting colour by doing that. And don't worry if you get this preview graph and it looks nothing like your data. That's just a made up graph that SPSS does. If we click OK, in the output window, we'll get a graph. But that graph maybe doesn't look exactly the way you want it to look. Let's say that we want to make a graph that looks a bit more like this. So we want to get rid of grid lines. We want to change the X and the Y axes. Maybe we want to change the colour of the points for some reason. So what I want you to do is double click on the graph, and that gets up what's called the chart editor. So it opens yet another window up. So don't try to make changes while it's in the output window. You've got to double click it to get the chart editor. So if I do that to show you, There you go. This is the chart editor, and it's only now that I can make changes. So I'm going to get you to click on the y-axis title to change this long name so it says score from test and percentage. So I'm just typing that in. Press return and it changes it. I'm going to close this. And then on the x-axis, we're going to change it to worth subscale response. Another thing we might want to do is delete the grid lines. To do that, we're going to select them in the chart editor. So get your mouse and click on them, and they should appear with a yellow outline around them. We want to try and get up this properties window, another window, and to delete the grid lines, I'm going to press this option here, which makes them transparent. But for that to work, I need to also press apply and close it. Now I've deselected the horizontal ones, so I'm going to try that again. Transparent, apply, and that should get rid of my horizontal ones like that. Then to change the colour of the points, we need to click on the points and choose the colour from that window that pops up. When you click on the points, just make a note of which points are highlighted with yellow. So if I click on a red male point, then you'll notice the first time I click on it, all the points are highlighted. If I click on that again, only the male points are highlighted. And that's what you want. Double click that to get up this properties window, and then I can change the fill or the border. So if I change the fill, let's say to this green, I've again got to click apply to get that to change. And then let's see if I can click on the females now. There we go, we've got all the females selected, and I'm going to just change that to, let's say, orange. Apply that, and then close. The only other thing that I want to do to this graph is tidy up the numbers on the x-axis. You'll see along here, it's put 1.00, 2.00. I just wanted to say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's a little bit trickier if you don't know how to do it. So again, any element you want to change, click on it, double click it to get a window up, and it's hidden under this tab called number format. Here you've got an option to change the number of decimal places. If we delete 2 and put in 0, again we've got to press apply, then it will change these numbers. Then if you close that chart editor, it changes that graph in the output window. So we've opened up SPSS and got data in, we've done a bit of data management, calculated some descriptive statistics, and then made a graph. What I suggest you do now is practice that again, because each time you use SPSS you'll learn more. So we have a practice file called exercise data growing beans, which is found on the VLE, and we have an exercise handout which is also on the VLE. So if I go here, I'll show you the exercise data growing beans is there. You can open it up. And the exercise for getting started with SPSS is down here. It shouldn't take you too long. Less than half an hour at least. And just another note, everything we've covered today and more can be found in our SPSS Quick Start Guide. Again, that's on the VLE underneath getting started with SPSS. So if we open that up, click on SPSS Quick Start Guide, you'll see that opening SPSS, getting data in, and the variable view explanation is there. There's a few bits and pieces about cleaning data, more than we've covered today. We've not covered separating data, so you might find that useful. And there's a bit more detail on how to check for the normal distribution, check assumptions of normal distribution there. There's also information on running tests. We will be covering that in the next workshop as well, though. In the section that's making graphs, it has how to make all these different graphs. We've only done scatter plots, but there's instructions there on how to make bar graphs and line plots as well.